All right, guys, we got 2 cars I have to build before TROG. Hardly any time left, and we're gonna get it done like we always do. Let's get started. All right, so we got this awesome Model A. As you can see, it is mobile, but you have to see how that goes down in the video. Brand new motor, never been ran before. Really big carburetors for this setup. I think we could jet it down. It's still gonna eat. It's gonna be set up more for like wide open throttle than it is going to be for driving around town. So it's good for TROG, he's gonna enjoy it. Once it's done with TROG, I think we need to change the plugs and change the jets and keep it running depending on how he wants to drive the car. That's up to him. We got safety harnesses in here, a couple different TROG rules we got to follow. I need to wire this up. It's going from 12 volt or 6 volt to 12 volt, make it a little bit more drivable for him. So let's get this going. All right, so I have a good example today for a crank no start for a Model A. I have not diagnosed it yet, so what I'm going to do is film myself diagnosing this. I'm going to show you guys what steps I go through to figure out what's wrong with the Model A banger. Also, this is a 6 volt system. This is going to give you guys, I don't know, a little bit more explanation or just a little more information on diagnosing 6 volt as well. So let's get started. All right, so on a crank no start, the first thing I always do is check the battery. On a 6 volt, we're looking for 6.3 to like 6.4 for a fully charged battery. On a 12 volt, anything above 12.5, anything below 12.4 is not good. So if we have low voltage from the battery, which is here in the trunk on this one, if you have any worn out ignition components at all, they might not even work with a low battery. So very first step, check your battery voltage. I'm gonna do that with my Power Master. It's gonna tell me what voltage we have with the battery, but I'm also gonna be able to tell where there is voltage in the wiring system that's in this and where there's not voltage in the wiring system. So let me get this hooked up. Looks like voltage is good. Let's see what else is going on. All right, my key's on. I'm gonna switch. Then we have a battery disconnect here. Turn that on. And let's see if our coil has power or not. So this is a positive ground. So we need to go to the negative side here. It's got voltage. See, we have black, another black. Let's take our cover off to see where these wires are going. Back here. Let's go into the distributor. Where's the yellow going? And we also have this other black. Well, let's follow some of these wires and see where they're all going. So this should be a Protronix distributor. We got black and yellow here. The yellow. Where's the yellow going? All right, so I traced this yellow wire and it's going to the firewall. So that's not good. Yeah, so this is hooked up wrong and this distributor's blown. At least it's a quick, figured out what was wrong with it quick. So we got 2 wires coming out of this distributor. They need to go both sides of the coil. That's how a Protronix works. It's going to ground itself through magnetism as the armature spins, right? I'm not your giant science guy. I can't tell you all the super specific stuff, but I can help you understand how it works. Instead of having points, opening the points, closing the points, creating a gap and a spark, we just have a magnet spinning, and wherever the magnet is, magnetizes the Protronix, and it grounds it, tells it to fire. So one side needs to be positive side of the coil, the other side needs to go to the ground of the coil, because the coil needs to be grounded, even though it's positive side. Still the same thing is working here, just kind of a little bit reversed. Watch one of my other videos if you want to see how to wire up distributors for positive ground. It's the same thing, guys, in the other direction. It's still grounding it. So we can't run the ground off of the body. The distributor needs to be doing the ground. So this Protronix is fried. Let's throw up another Protronix in it and see why this fuel pump isn't running. So, I mean, if we don't have fuel, it's not gonna start either, but this is a brand new motor, so we're kind of running into, you know, just assembly issues. So let me swap out this distributor and see what happens. All right, so I'm working on this car for the owner. He wants to get ready for TROG, so this needs to be done in like 2 weeks. So what we decided, or what I recommended that he do, which he's totally up for it, let's go ahead and switch this over to 12 volts. I mean, I'm not saying 12 volts is superior to 6 volts. A lot of people like to argue that. But what I can say is you can always get a jump from somebody. You can always go buy a battery. Technically, you could always buy an alternator if you're running an alternator. I like to run the 1-wires. It's technically a 2017 Camaro alternator, but aftermarket has a lot of great versions of that specific alternator, black, chrome, you know, nice housings, all that kind of stuff. Also, what's it called? The Power Master looks like a generator, even though it's an alternator and it's a 1-wire. So there's a lot of great options for a car to look vintage, old school, to look similar to stock, but also have the reliability part of being able to get a jump, be able to buy a battery, be able to buy an alternator, stuff like that. And for some reason, most people understand 12-volt circuits better. It's easier for them to diagnose issues, stuff like that. So, hey, we're gonna go 12 volts on this. That's how we're gonna fix it, even though we do need a new distributor. So we just got a distributor that's 12 volts and it's ready to plug and play. So let's get this thing running. I'm gonna show you the easiest way to replace a distributor on a Model A. Really, probably the easiest motor I've ever replaced a distributor on. So the first thing we're going to do is get it to top dead center of the first cylinder. And Ford made this awesome setup here to where this bolt goes into a timing gear. So what we need to do is unscrew this bolt here, which I already broke it loose. And we're gonna flip it around the other direction. Now this timing gear has a little detent on it, or a little like inward bump, to where when I spin this motor over, when this goes inside that bump on that on that timing gear, it'll clip in. That'll be the top dead center of cylinder number 1. Sometimes it's easy to do it like this. Now I have to grab a breaker bar and spin the motor over, make sure it's not in gear. Ooh, that's loose. Don't like to see it loose. That's what's holding the distributor in. So technically, nothing was really holding the distributor in. So this should pop out fairly easy. There we go. And the intermediate shaft's down in there. I'm not gonna mess with that at all. Just gonna make sure it's pushed all the way down and it's inside the notch. I can't spin it, so I'm just gonna leave it. So here's our new 12-volt distributor. So we don't have to worry about 6-volt anymore. There we are. We're right where we want to be. Everything feels pretty good. Let's go ahead and lock it down and see how it runs afterwards. So right there, we'll lock it down with a new bolt. Now, if you do this too tight, you can actually break the distributor housing, so just be careful on that step. And this nut is going to keep it tight. So what I'm going to do is put my Allen on here, making sure this does not spin while I snug that nut down. screwdriver out. And make sure you take a good mental note of where that's pointing. And I like to mark it. So it's gonna rotate this way, counterclockwise. 1, 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 4, 3 is the firing order. Just double checking all my work here. Now the way we wire this up is really important because this is no longer wired up like the Model A. Yellow is going to go to ground, and I don't know why they made that yellow. They should have made that a different color. That's usually ignition. So yellow goes to ground. Red is going to the positive side of the coil. Black is going to the negative side of the coil. The biggest difference now is we cannot share any of our powers or anything from the block. We want to come straight from the ignition switch straight to the coil. So switch, coil, that's where the power is coming from. It is not shared or used with anything else. This car does have a fuel pump on it. We do not want to share the power with the fuel pump. Spikes can actually blow Petronics. So it has to be an isolated circuit so we don't get any ignition spikes. I know that sounds complicated if I were to explain ignition spikes, but make sure the power comes directly from the battery to the distributor and not chained with anything else. If we're going to be sharing ignition with the fuel pump needs to run on a relay. It cannot be directly ran off the same thing from the coil. So keep that in mind, guys. We cannot do that like how you did with the older distributors. And I just want to highlight something that's really important. Whenever you put in ignition components in any motor, all the ignition components have to match and work together. So since we're changing over to Petronics, our point wires and our point coil is no longer going to work. We have to change over to suppression core wires. You cannot run solid core or copper core wires with Petronics. And for this Petronics setup, they recommend a 3.0 to 3.5 resistance coil. So we're going to check our coil and see what we have here. Now, it's pretty simple. We're going to set it up to resistance on the voltmeter, and we're going to hold positive, positive, negative, negative, and we're going to give it a second to build up resistance. It's not going to be right away. And it is saying 3.2, which I guess that's close enough to a 3.0. Now it's saying 3.1. Okay, so this coil is good to go with this Petronics, and we're not going to blow anything up. When we mix match this kind of stuff, that's when you get reliability issues. You burn up your Petronics, you burn up something you don't want to burn up. This is the old coil that was in it. Every time I replace a distributor, I always just put a brand new coil in it. I mean, we're talking like 20, 30 bucks to make the whole system fresh and ready to go. So let's just check the old coil and see what it has for resistance. And it's saying 1.2, so that is huge difference. That would not work, even though this engine was running with this coil would burn up our Petronics setup. So always test your coils, make sure they are right, test them on their old, make sure the resistance hasn't changed to the point where it can jeopardize other things in the ignition system. So head over to the Wired Customs YouTube channel, check us out. We got a lot of good information, stuff like this. So. All right, so I might have already said it, but this is epoxy filled coil, so we can mount this one upside down with no regrets. Oh no, my washers, I just dropped my washer. I caught it in my hand, thankfully. There's one, there's two. I'll put those on here in a second when I go to put the wires on, but like I said, we can put this on with no regrets because it can actually be hanging upside down. It's not gonna leak oil. All right, so since I am adding the new ignition system in this, new coil, I actually added a new one wire generator for 12 volt. Since we're switching over to 12 volt, I feel responsible for the electrical components and safety of this car. So every wire that was in it's coming out, completely starting over, which it's really not that many wires, but whenever I make major changes like that, I want to have complete control of the entire electrical system, the headlights, the electric fuel pump, the ignition, all that kind of stuff. I just hit the reset on everything, and that ensures that mentally I know exactly what every circuit is doing, and I can guarantee that this is safe, it's practical, and it's going to last, you know, the age of the car is what I'm always going for. So I have the switch out here. Can't really see it too well. And I'm just gonna rewire the on and off switch to turn just the coil on and off. Then down here, we got this on and off switch for electric fuel pump. That's what that's going to do when I get done. So he can turn it on, get the coil on, then flip the electric fuel pump on. The car is ready to run, fuel pump off, ignition off, coil off, everything stops and everything's nice and safe. Right there. Yeah, now spin it. That's all right.
You say this was not run before?
No, it's brand new.
Switch on?
Yeah, switch is on.
Steps too.
All right, so all we have to do now is just jet this thing down just a little bit. These are 91s. This thing should really have 81s in it, but we can correct that with smaller jets. It is eating way too much fuel. Then we're gonna put a little bit more advance into it. Then we'll be driving this. Let's take this thing for a ride.